My name's Joan Haskell, and I work in the General Collections Department. I'm going to speak briefly here about reassigning books to other locations. Assigning books to locations in our department usually occurs at some stage in processing, most of the time when new books have arrived. The individual librarians in our department are responsible for deciding where a book will be located. In General Collections, we have 33 location codes, and incredible as it seems, we are using all of them most of the time. Some of the locations that we have on our floor are the special centers: African American, Gay Lesbian, the Teen Center. The International Center has its own responsibility for the Chinese Center and Filipino American Center. In addition to these special areas, we have special collections of our own, such as the reference science fiction, known as the McComas collection, and the occult books, most of the 133s. So with all these location codes, it's like a merry-go-round or a revolving door of changing places for the books. We're changing circ to ref and ref to circ, closed stacks to the open shelves, and just when we think everything's settled, the librarians change their minds and we change the location again. Finally, we change locations when we give books to other departments. Primarily, that is the San Francisco History Room and Special Collections. If a book seems to be suitable for their collection, we offer it to them. This would be fine press books, books about the Western United States history and description and travel. This is about repair and conservation of materials. Every day in General Collections, 20 or 30 books arrive on the repair shelves. Sometimes 2 or 3 box loads come in from borrower services, so we have to constantly keep up on the repair or we'll be deluged by it. We do a preliminary sorting of the books, removing things such as mildewed books, missing barcodes, books needing new labels, new Mylar covers. We also tried to repair in the department some simple repairs, paperbacks that need taping. And after the preliminary sorting is done, what books remain are sorted and given to individual librarians, arranged by their order areas. So this probably happens about once a week. Everyone gets a stack of repair books on their desk, and they are the ones responsible for deciding the disposition of those titles. Either repair, if possible, replace, or withdraw. So after the decisions are made, the books are returned to the processing shelves. We remove the book jackets and save them in a file. Some of the books will go out to the bindery, and so we will lose the jacket if we don't do that. And then they're marked damaged and sent on down to Marie in preservation with the hope that she can make some sense and manage to repair them. So that's basically the procedure. This is about replacement of worn and outdated materials. This usually occurs in relation to repairs in our department or withdrawals. The individual selector is responsible for deciding whether or not a book will be replaced. It's their responsibility to check for last copies, to check books in print to see if it can be replaced. This system is, as I said, it's really related to repairs. There was a time when we had special replacement lists, or order lists that would go in maybe twice a year, but it has been some years since that was done. So aside from the replacements related to repairs, it's the monthly selection list and special replacement lists that are offered to us. This is withdrawal of materials from main library collections. It takes self-confidence to weed, and I really don't know how long it will be before you feel that way. I've heard it said that you must be working in a collection 6 months or a year before you're really able to weed it, but I think it's really quite individual. I am always deeply impressed to know that branch librarians are responsible for the entire Dewey range and fiction. I just don't know how you do it. By comparison, my order areas assigned to me have been very precise. I've ordered US history, education, and for the longest time, travel. So in every case, I approached them in a similar way. I first of all made a pest of myself, I'm sure, by asking senior librarians and more experienced staff what they knew. I went to the shelf and looked at the books, both the circulating and reference, to see what kinds of things they had and what they were saving. I went to bookstores to see what was out there that perhaps we should have and did not. In addition to book reviews, I read articles on travel collections, and I looked at bibliographies to see what was considered the standard sources. But I think more than anything, I made a point of really answering patrons' questions to the fullest, no matter how difficult or peculiar, because I found in the process that I learned myself. I developed a particular fondness for transportation schedules, for instance, ships, trains, and planes. And one day I found that I could read the official airline guide upside down from the other side of the counter. The reference desk can tell the patron, oh no, you really have to change planes in Helsinki. So at that point I began to think that I was really learning and my confidence was growing. And so it seemed that in always searching for the answers and for someone to give me advice, one day I became the person I was looking for. And I had the knowledge, a knowledge of my collection that gave me the self-confidence and assurance to weed it. So I'm going to tell you now how I go about that. And I actually want to mention that I think of weeding as being two kinds. There's the passive weeding, where books arrive on your desk, they're needing repair or whatever, and you must decide eventually to withdraw it. But I want to tell you my view of active weeding, which is what I've developed a routine over the years and which is really required. So what I usually do is twice a year in February and November, and I choose this time of year because there usually are more books on the shelf. I can get a better idea of what we really have. So I go out to the shelves with my truck and I start to weed. I spend about 2 hours a day, and it takes me almost a month to get through the collection. Most of the work involved is after the book has been removed, checking for last copies, checking books in print for new editions or replacements. I actually weed the reference books first, but it's a slightly different procedure, and so I won't go into it here. There is a handout in your packet that tells you if you're interested in reading it. So for the circulating travel, I first of all go through the shelves, pulling annual publications that are updated. Fodor's, Frommer's, Let's Go. But I don't remove everything. If the only copy on the shelf is Let's Go London, 1995, it stays there. I would not throw that out. I'm waiting to see when I have newer editions in. Next, I go through looking for revised editions, or rather, I'm looking for the previous edition that has had a revised edition. Titles such as Lonely Planet, Moon, handbooks do not come out every year. The revised editions are not always on the shelf next to each other since the Dewey numbers have changed. One example was Indonesia used to be 919.1 and now it's 915.98. But eventually I catch the old edition and remove them. Then I go back to the shelf for a kind of a combination of checking. I'm looking for duplicates or multiple copies. I'm checking the due date slips to see why these books have not circulated. I'm also looking for worn materials that can either be repaired or replaced. And then there's a kind of general category, I would just say, books that are just embarrassing to have in the collection, that are so old that if somebody brought it up to the desk and showed you it, you would be embarrassed to say that you had it. Titles such as Anne mentioned, contact lens guides from 20 years ago, or something like Family Camping in the Sierras from 1975. You ask yourself, what are we doing with this? It's embarrassing. So that's a kind of other category. So the last thing I do is I go through the books one by one, looking at the due date slip. If it hasn't circulated in 2 years, it gets looked at very long and hard. And I try to be ruthless. But of course, sometimes I make exceptions. I think, it's such a cute little book. I like the color pictures in it. Maybe somebody will check it out next year. So it might go back on the shelf. I As I said, I tried to be ruthless. I think, what are you doing here sleeping on the shelf? What do you think this is, an archive? And yet I make exceptions all the time. In trying to be scientific or objective, it's unavoidable. So some other exceptions that turn up as I'm looking for these books are archaeology books in the 913s. The tomb of Tutankhamun is forever of interest, and I never throw out books in this area. They're replaced or repaired if possible. And another category that's of enduring interest, discovery, exploration, and shipwrecks. The Titanic is alive and well. It's on Broadway. It won the Tony Award, didn't it? And so here's another area where no real weeding goes on. It's repair and replacement. So that's about the gist of my weeding routine, and I'll turn the discussion back to Anne now. Thank you.